2 out of 3 couples are ending in divorce. Like, you're not
Yeah.
special. Everybody's somebody knows somebody who's gone through it. You've personally been
Mm-hmm.
impacted by it. It exists, okay? So we really have the opportunity here to have the right conversations, to put the right foot
Mm-hmm.
forward, and to realize that it's just about being human, treating your children like humans. Having that difficult conversation doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be ugly. It doesn't even have to include a ton of details. The bottom line is that it didn't work. We made a decision to try something different. Let's give it a go.
Hey, Mama. Welcome to the Working Moms Playbook, the go-to podcast for moms balancing careers and babies. I'm your host, Antonia DePace, former editor, current marketing maven, and mom of one. Each week, we're breaking down the systems, mindsets, and support every working mom needs to thrive, whether it be at work, at home, or everywhere in between. So let's get into it. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Working Moms Playbook. I am your host, Antonia DePace. This week, we have a Real Moms Chat, which I just love these little chats. They're like cozy coffee, sit down as if we were here in person. And this week, I am sitting down with Tiff Preston-Thomas, and she is the Director of Canine Solutions with Coastal Pines Canine Dog Training. And then she also supports her husband's small business initiatives with his company, Lakes Mechanical Heating and Cooling. You can actually catch them on the cover of this month's Medford Living magazine. For all of my New Jersey, Philadelphia listeners, definitely check out the story there. In addition to all of those happenings, Tiff has a bachelor's of English and master's in psychology, where she primarily focuses on divorce dynamics related to children, plus a side study in narcissistic personality disorder. You've also written and illustrated and published 2 children's books, which is something that is on my wish list. So that stood out to me, which is really cool. And then Tiff also has a blended family of 7 where everyone ages, like children-wise, from like 10 months to 15 years, which is awesome. I mean, it's like a big, happy family. So
Yeah.
welcome, Tiff. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. You mentioned coffee, and now I realize I am without coffee. So
Not any coffee for the whole day?
I have not had an ounce of coffee yet.
Wow.
I
That
know
is,
I am running on fumes as working moms essentially always do anyway.
yes. Yeah, I mean, that's for sure. Coffee was definitely at the top of my list this morning. So,
Well, you are ahead of the
um,
game.
yeah, yeah. I might need another cup soon, but you never know. Um, I would love, I think we've already kind of like thought about what we're going to talk about today, which is so special. But I really want to start with like your master's research and the focus. So let's unpack that a little bit for our listeners of like what brought your interest into psychology and diverse dynamics for children specifically, and how that's kind of like branched out into your life today.
Sure. I think for me, psychology is just sort of innate. It's an organic thing that I was born and called to do or work with in some capacity. The human mind and behavior fascinates me. It always has. So, in getting my master's in psychology, it really afforded me the opportunity to, I guess, dive into it a little bit more outside of just being around humans all the time and having an interest in it. Outside of that, my research was sort of born from my own experience, having been through divorce with my own children, and sort of being faced with the ultimate choice of how do I go about this? How do I make sure that my kids are okay for, for the long term based on my own decisions and my former spouse's decisions. And I really felt like I was faced with that decision very early on in the process. When you decide to get divorced, that is the ultimate decision. How do we go about this? And I ultimately decided that it didn't have to be ugly, it didn't have to be gross, and it didn't have to be this heavy thing that negatively impacted our children. I really committed myself very early on to essentially creating a good, positive relationship with my children through that process and kind of reframing it around that to make sure that they were okay in the end, that they were actually better for it. And then my research sort of fell into place after making those decisions and really figuring out all of the moving parts and how it impacts our kids, really.
From that research and then in combination with having that going on at the same time as like your own personal life experiences, what were some of those facts that surprised you the most? That, of course, you either implemented or brought to light as you went through your own divorce?
I think the reality is, right, is that our children are at the hand of our decisions, right? So what surprised me the most was that nobody slowed down enough to choose positive association, to choose coming out of it on the other side, to choose to reframe it completely, to say, hey, this doesn't have to be icky. This doesn't have to be detrimental. This actually could be a good thing, especially taking into account this world that we live in now. I mean, now it's 2026 and the ball game is different. All the players are different. Everything around us is so much more saturated and intense than when we were children. Just a reassessment had, in my opinion, hadn't been done in a long time. And I really wanted to commit to it being a positive thing, which it surprised me that a lot of people don't have that perspective, one. And then two, nobody's really talking about it. It's crazy. It's like two out of three relationships end in divorce and nobody's talking about how we can make it okay or how do we prevent things from happening in school that translate to home and vice versa. How do we normalize this thing that is very, very normal? And I think that was the most
Right.
surprising thing, honestly.
2 out of 3 couples end up in divorce. It's like it's so true, like, with those statistics really out there, it makes it even more important to have those conversations, and especially in a world where a divorce often is very ugly, right? And it often can be, like, very negative for the kids. I think of, like, multiple situations growing up where I had friends whose parents had divorced, whether it be at a young age or, in a middle school age, and, like, they for Christmas time, they were getting 2 Nintendo DSs because they weren't allowed to bring gifts from one parent's house to the other parent's house because, like, the feuding was that bad that, like, they wanted 0 trace. And then I think of, like, another situation that's on the more positive side, which, like, you would probably love, but I just remember there was one girl whose parents had divorced at one point in her life, and they had maintained such a positive, good co-parenting relationship that they actually purchased neighboring houses so that they could still live their own lives and be separate, but then also still get to co-parent their daughter in a way where they both did get to see her every day and they didn't have to deal with the separation and, like, in terms of distance with their kid. And that's, of course, very much so an Easter egg that happened.
Yeah, I'm not gonna live next to my ex,
Yeah,
by
that's
any
an Easter
stretch of the
egg.
myth. Yeah.
But
But
it's
it's
just
not
still
far
cool to
off.
think about. Yeah, it's still
It's
cool to
not
think
far off.
about.
I think that people don't realize that there's one singular choice that defines the entire process, and that has to happen very early on. And that is the choice of like, how do we want this to look and feel long term, not just right now, right? Because you have your experience as a as one person going through it, and then your partner has their or your former partner has their own experience, and then there's the kids, and they don't. I think we were raised, or at least I was, around this belief system that the kids are always like inherently in the middle. And I
Mhm.
think I think for me, I wanted to establish that like the middle doesn't have to be so bad, right? The middle could be a positive space in which they have access to both parents, and both parents are sort of reaching over the kids in the middle to high five, like we've done right by our children. And I don't know why people don't talk about it more, in the
Yeah.
spirit of understanding the statistic. Like, we're all impacted one way or another, whether you're actively, going through a divorce, or you have been through a divorce, or you are thinking about divorce, and, you know, twice removed. We're all impacted by it one way or another at some point in our lives.
Right. And I think back to like what that first conversation is, and I'm sure listeners are saying right now or thinking in their heads like, well, that's all ideal, but my partner didn't want to
Yep.
have that
Yep.
positive relationship. So
Oh, sure.
what's that first conversation really look like? And maybe even tell me more about like what that conversation looked like for you.
I think there are a couple of different layers involved. The conversation, we've never been through this before. So I do think it
Mhm.
takes one, if not both, individuals involved to step up and go, okay, like, how do we want this to look? But
Mhm.
I think at the root of it, when you really, really reduce it down, you just have to be human. That's it. I think that divorce closely relates to a belief system in which it's one person against the other person. And it's okay that the marriage didn't work. It's okay that you're different people, and trying to make this one thing work didn't work. It's okay. That's okay. I think accepting that it's okay is probably where you need to start. If you can't do that, it becomes really, really that's where it becomes challenging. But if you
Yeah.
can get back to basics and assume responsibility of being human and go, okay, it didn't work, but now we have a choice to do something that does work. And if neither of you have gone through it before, then it's okay to not get it perfect. It's okay to not know exactly how to navigate every single thing. You mentioned Christmas, that comes up a lot. I think that that's like on everyone's brain, but it
Yeah.
really comes down to just not having it be one person versus the other person, like a joint effort. And once you establish that as like a baseline for where you're starting, and you just get back to basics on being humans and treating each other with respect, because you don't actually have to understand any of it. You don't actually have to like the other person. You just have to respect the other person and then make that decision together. But it definitely can't be just one person. You have to agree on.
Yeah. It really sounds like a lot of I feel like a lot of people struggle with this in general because divorce is obviously going to be emotionally hurtful and a lot of other emotions as well. Like going through it, everyone experiences it the same and differently at the same time. But like when kids are involved, it sounds like the most important part is really being able to distinctly separate those unresolved adult emotions from parenting responsibilities. And in doing so, perhaps that can help curate a more positive experience, especially for the kids who are involved. And then that, of course, sets a pattern for co-parenting later on.
Yeah,
Does that
I
sound
mean,
right?
yeah, I think you're like more than halfway there. I do
Yeah.
think that it is a matter of being on the same page. I think that that cultivates, the beginning, middle, and end of this journey. Which, by the way, as everyone's kind of out there thinking about divorce like this, it's a never-ending journey. So, when you really, really reduce it down and you return back to basics on being human, what I mean by that is going, hey, life is too short to be you against me, to be fighting about this weekend and that weekend and stuff going from house to house. Listen, little kids, little problems. They get older, they get more stuff, they get more emotional baggage. They go through a whole lot of changes and shifts. And so when we talk about divorce, I really just encourage everyone to think about it like a life shift. How do you handle life shifts in general? Do that.
Yeah.
Do that thing where you get into, not just survival mode, but like overcoming it in a positive way. It's no different than any other life shift, right? So but in being human and having these conversations, it's like life is just too short to do this thing. Like, do you really want to fight about everything? Do you really want to let it in? Because the minute you let it in, it doesn't go away. It's like I equate it to the ugly side of divorce is like chocolate, and then the positive is vanilla. And then when you put them both in a bowl and you start to like muddy the bowl up a little bit with your spoon, the chocolate can be very overpowering naturally. That's what
Mm.
you're
Mm-hmm.
naturally going to get the most of. So you really have to work a little bit to have more vanilla in your bowl. But
Okay.
it is a choice. Every day it's a choice, and it's not going to be perfect, and that's totally fine. But it really becomes just about being human, and life is too short to do it the other way. I
Yeah. Yeah. And then you throw like the fact that you're working into the mix.
think. Oh
And you're
yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah. You're like
yeah.
adding that responsibility. And I'm sure, figuring out pickups and drop offs and childcare and schedules. And that disrupts a system that you probably already had as well, which sets up like the next topic really of actually like co-parenting and what defines a successful co-parenting relationship. Um, how do you define that not only for the parents, but also a successful co-parenting relationship and what that looks like for the kids?
Yeah, so I think honestly, it's not about the parents at all, and it shouldn't be. If you're doing it in a positive way and you're trying to normalize a situation that you've created as adults, it's bred from adult experience, then your approach to parenting through that experience can't also mirror the adult needs and expectations. It has to be strictly focused on the kids, meaning developmentally from the age of birth to about 6, 7 years old, you're looking at a more consistent developmental phase in which the kids need to have access to both of their parents on a more rolling basis. Now, I say it's
Okay.
focused on the kids because uh, let's just use the example of a 2-2-3 schedule in which the child or children are with one parent for 2 days, another parent for 3 days, and then another 2 days. So a 2-2-3, then it rotates. It's
Okay.
obviously very difficult for parents living in two separate places, two separate homes, kids with stuff, pickups, drop-offs, you already mentioned. I think that most of the time parents put their parent foot forward and their needs and expectations forward, and it really has to be about the kids. So for that age group, they really need access to both parents to really fully continue to develop their relationship with both parents separately, which would be happening inside a home under one roof anyway. So we kind of have to mirror that, even though it creates a burden and stress on us as parents, with pickups, drop-offs, and all the moving parts. It definitely is a lot busier, but it needs to match where they are developmentally. That's why I say it has to
Okay.
be one step forward towards the kids. What do the kids actually need? Basic, they need access to both parents until about age 7. And then you can look
Okay.
ahead to a different schedule that matches their development in that space. So from 7 to about 14, 15 years old, they really need more consistency. So I would implement a schedule of like a week on or a week off, just to like a 7-7 schedule, just so that they can close the loop on the expectations and the responsibilities and the flow in one home before transitioning to the next. Developmentally, that's more sound. It doesn't work for everybody because most times we're trained to, okay, what works for my schedule, what works for your schedule, and then it's one person versus the other person. So if we
Right.
humanize it, we normalize it, and we put our foot forward in the needs of the kids, then we're looking at a much easier flow all around.
Right. Right. So then it's also like personal accountability and how that kind of plays a
Yeah.
role in healthy co-parenting as well. What does that really look like, especially in situations like this? Like there's personal accountability and the relationship didn't work out. So now you also, and if that's because of personal accountability or that was part of it, how does that then potentially affect the co-parenting dynamic?
You're not gonna like what I have to say. And most
That's
and most
okay. That's
and most
okay.
people don't. And most people don't. But the
Yeah.
reality is it doesn't matter how we got here. right? It
Mm-hmm.
has none of those moving parts. There could be 101 Dalmatian reasons why something didn't work out, or and that's really where we breed the you versus me situation when we revisit the why we how we got here.
Okay.
I want to encourage everybody to sort of transition from how we got here to how do we want it to look moving forward, and leave all of that stuff behind because it doesn't actually matter. And that's the part that people want to cling to it because it feels good to feel. I get it. We're human. That's something natural that we do, but it doesn't actually matter. When it comes to co-parenting, I also want to throw away the word co-parenting. I used to use it quite a bit, but then it just didn't jive, and I couldn't figure out why for a while until I realized that it's not actually a real concept. It's a term that was coined for the people that wanted to share responsibility, almost like a punch in and punch out situation. Like the kids are with me, so
Mm,
like this is my duty, and you mentioned personal accountability. It aligns very much with that. But the reality is that none of that stuff mattered. How we got here doesn't matter. Nobody cares. Moving forward, it's also not co-parenting. It's just parenting. And if you
yeah.
can keep that mentality that it's just parenting, it doesn't matter where you are, whose weekend it is, none of that matters. None of that matters. It's just parenting.
Yeah.
You are available to your children when your children need you. You do what you need to do that's right by your children because they need you. And that's it. There's no real like co-parenting doesn't actually exist. It's just parenting.
Right. Let's dive into what I'm sure everybody is thinking right now, or at least has come across. But let's talk special occasions, whether
Mhm.
they be holidays, big life moments, birthdays.
Yep.
What did those celebrations look like? What does collaboration look like for those types of celebrations? Even perhaps maybe highlighting like what you guys have done.
So I love that you use the word collaboration because I do feel that, especially when the kids are little, it requires collaboration. And I don't know if you remember or your listeners remember doing group projects growing up, where you get
Yeah.
assigned a group project with a bunch of people you either don't like or like don't know at
Yeah.
all, and um,
Yep.
it's kind of the same thing because you absolutely have to abandon everything that happened for the sake of what's going to happen. And that's the thing that, most folks don't get right, right? When you have that initial conversation and figure out how you want it to look, it requires you to just table all the crap, just to put everything aside and not bring it into this new space because this new space is completely uncharted and it requires immense collaboration, especially when the kids are little. I
Mhm.
always I always joke that when you walk into a new house and you're viewing properties to buy, you're like, where am I going to put the Christmas tree? Or like,
Yeah.
you kind of have, you
Yeah.
go through that mental process of picturing your life in that space. Well, the
Yeah.
reality is that when you get divorced, it's nothing that you pictured. You don't get married to get divorced usually. So I kind of equate walking around and looking about where you're going to put the tree to how people feel about special occasions post divorce. And the thing is that it requires not only collaboration, but it also requires sacrifice and perspective. You have to maintain perspective. So for us, we collaborated on Christmas. Specifically, I'll just use that one occasion as an example. We collaborated quite a bit when they were little to make it more of a holistic experience that involved both of us.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
it was pretty
Yeah.
clear that we were able to match in conversation with our kids, where do you want to wake up? Like, how do you want to see this? Or what would that make you feel? Those kinds of conversations. Taking inventory with your children through divorce, post divorce is very, very crucial. You don't know unless you ask. And we often don't ask because we're scared of the answer. Or we don't trust
Yeah.
ourselves to leave all the crap behind and not have it kind of trickle into these conversations. It
Right.
you have to show great restraint. That is absolutely sure. Um, but related to Christmas, we did collaborate very early on, and then we sort of transitioned to a space where it was like, okay, we can choose to rotate year after year, and the kids, this and that, and that can be their normal, or I don't know, like we could get creative, right?
Yeah.
So my family, we're blended now, but when we were blending, there were six of us. So we decided to do our Christmas the weekend before Christmas. And
Okay.
that actually worked out well because we didn't have to rush anywhere. We didn't have to rush through our presents. We got to spend time together. We created a whole experience for an entire weekend, and then the kids just went to their other respective homes and did their regular Christmas, and it really was very non-disruptive for them mentally and
Yeah.
emotionally. It kept
Yeah.
the Christmas that they remember intact, and it added to it. It created
Okay.
um, a positive experience related to Christmas that was just honestly creative and interesting, and it stuck. And so every year now, my family, all seven of us, now there are seven of us. So we used to call it six miss, but this year the kids roped us into calling it 6-7 miss because he's so little. So yeah, and he's our shared family baby. So we have 6-7 miss,
Oh,
and but it's
yeah.
stuck and we do it every year. They have their Christmas and it's intact and we don't feel any type of way about it. You can drown in it. You can sit on Christmas and go like, "Oh my God, what are they, oh, they're having Christmas." But we already did it. So like we're okay.
Right. Right.
And we were actually sitting around the table on 6-7 is talking about how, honestly, I feel like we've done them a favor because when they are older and they're blending their own families with their partners,
Yeah.
we have no expectation that they're going to come around on Christmas. So we're like, you guys are welcome because we've already
Yeah.
adjusted to this like very, very, I don't know, productive, interesting, progressive approach to holidays.
Yeah.
So we
Let
do
me
it for
tell you, that's
everything.
a lesson. That's a lesson that like I'm feeling right now. Like I I was like very much so stuck in the way of like the traditions and the holidays that I had growing up. And, we've obviously had to blend, like, especially now that we have our son. And it changes every year. I feel like now,
Yeah.
like there's certain places we go every year, but then like traditions change and it's just it took a second to really, like, wrap my head around it, and you saying that, like, that just goes to show, like, that's one of those lessons for your blended family, for those children, like, that they are able to apply later on in life to a situation that for a lot of us is just so hard to figure out, like, blending holidays is so hard, and they just, like, they're already gonna have it figured out, like, they're
Yeah, it
10
doesn't
steps
it
ahead.
doesn't have to be hard. And I think that
Yeah.
that's the essence of all of it, right? Like it could be. You could certainly make it, ugly and chaotic, or you could bend and weave and you can make it not difficult at all. And I don't know,
Yep.
here's a thought, maybe enjoyable.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
it could be wonderful.
Yeah. Life is too short and it's about the experience. So it shouldn't really matter exactly when it is. So that, yeah, I love that. Six,
Plus,
7 minutes. That's so fun.
we took a poll. We were like, how many of you are going to do actual Christmas, and how many of you are going to do like 6-7 miss with your
Hmm.
family? It's split. Like some of them are like, ah, I don't know. I think I'm just going to do like regular Christmas with my kids, and we're like, okay, yeah, like for sure. But like, don't rush out of the house. You don't need to come to our house to see the
Yeah.
grandbabies, and later on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then one of our children said, well, I'm going to wake up, we're gonna do presents at my house, and then we're gonna come here to eat. And we were like, okay, fine, fine, fine. So
You're like
they've got
noted.
some version of it figured out. Yeah.
Oh, it's so funny.
They're already planning to eat us out of house and home with their own families. So
We're like, expect me, like I'm saying it now.
yeah, no, really. He's like, can I get that in writing?
Let's talk really quickly about the conversation that you have to have with your kids once parents decide that divorce is the way that is best for their relationship. We've spoken about how the parents can decide how to how to turn it into a positive and make this more positive all go around for everybody's mental sake. But we haven't really dived in yet about how that conversation really looks to the actual kids. And I'm assuming that this is also a conversation that depends based on age and all of that. But I'd love to dive a little bit more in on that because that's a hard conversation to have no matter how you
Yeah,
look at it for sure.
I think everybody's really scared of that conversation. I think it's scarier than it has to be because, and I think it comes down to the way that we handle decisions anyway. So it's really subjective
Hmm.
to the individual. And a lot of times, marital problems arise from different parenting views, or, obviously money is one, infidelity is another. But
Yeah.
one very key thing is that the conversation doesn't have to be this big elephant of a conversation. It's a very simple thing. You guys have made an adult decision. So, unfortunately, the repercussion of that is that you have to have some degree of an adult conversation with your children. So, you see that
Hmm.
there's a disconnect right from the jump, and it
Yeah.
spooks everybody. But you
Yep.
hit the nail on the head that it has to align with where they are developmentally, and that's according to age. So, the much younger children, it'll sound like, you know, we decided that this isn't really quite working for us, but it's okay. Like, and honestly, I think the conversation for me personally will sound the same, similar,
Hmm.
regardless of the age, but it really is very simple. This isn't working. And in life, sometimes when something doesn't work, we have to figure out a way that works better. And I think that that's the tone of the conversation. That's how it should be. And then you say, this is what it's going to look like. Nobody knows quite how to do this, so we're all going to do it together, and it's going to be, it's going to require all of us to talk, and it's going to require
Yeah.
all of us to feel and to share with each other. So then the second part of that conversation is just, what questions do you guys have? How do you feel, and what can we do to make it feel less scary? Because it doesn't have to be scary. Um,
Yeah.
but I think the big misstep is that when you decide to get a divorce, you're making an adult decision that impacts children. So, unfortunately, the consequence there is that you have to have an adult conversation with your children. And a
Right.
lot of people don't want to do that. So then it breeds ugliness. It breeds blame. It breeds a lot of icky. Divorce causes the ugliest sides of people to just come out, and they become these versions of themselves that maybe they don't even recognize. But it
Yeah.
really doesn't have to be like that. You have to keep perspective. You have to understand that it's not the end of the world, guys. Like, 2 out of 3 people, 2 out of 3 couples are ending in divorce. Like, you're not special. Everybody's somebody knows somebody who's gone through it. You've personally been impacted by it. It exists, okay? So we really have the opportunity here to have the right conversations, to put the right foot forward, and to realize that it's just about being human, treating your children like humans. Having that difficult conversation doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be ugly. It doesn't even have to include a ton of details. The bottom line is that it didn't work. We made a decision to try something different. Let's give it a go. That's
Yeah.
pretty much it.
Yeah. So then what matters more in terms of child outcomes? The divorce itself or the level of conflict before divorce or after divorce?
I think it depends on the people.
Yeah.
I think that and it also depends on the age of the children. One common thread that I have noticed is that most folks don't realize how resilient their children are,
Mhm.
and how aware they are, how much they hear, how much they feel related to our decisions. And that's why I'm saying you have to, you're making these adult decisions, but you do the same thing when you choose to fight with your spouse in front of your children. And then
Right.
on the flip side of that, you do the same. It's a choice when you choose to talk badly about your former spouse in front of your children. So it really is, it's none of it's great. um, I would say that depending on the age, the more offensive, developmentally disruptive space to be in would be post-divorce conflict.
Okay. Yeah.
But if they're older, I've spoken to a lot of, teenagers who say, "Oh, my parents should have gotten divorced when I was like 4, because they
Yeah.
had
Yep.
really been through it." So it really is very subjective, but I think the biggest takeaway, honestly, just across all of these different topics related to divorce dynamics is that it's not that big of a deal. You guys, it didn't work. We have to figure out how to make the next part work better.
Right.
Otherwise, what are we doing?
Yeah. And there's so many I feel like there's been such a shift in mindsets already around divorce. I mean, as you said, 2 out of 3 couples, so it's more normalized now than
It's
I feel
getting
like it
better.
was. Yeah, like, I feel like it's been more normalized than, like, what it was when I was growing up, right? And then, of
Right.
course, like, what it was when my grandparents were having kids. But even so, it's like you said, like, if you can't have those adult conversations and you can't you either, like, can't decide to move forward with the divorce because you're afraid of affecting your kids negatively, but you're also arguing in front of your kids, or you get the divorce, you don't have the conversation, and then that creates a lot of issues. Like, regardless of what it is, it has potential to, like, really, like, make or break not only a family, but, like, the rest of your life, really, it
Yeah,
sounds like,
future
because
relationships especially.
yeah, and it's really sad because, like you said, there is another way around it. Like, you can choose peace. That's been my that's been my thing for 2026. Like, you can choose peace in general with, like, all sections of life.
I mean, you could just choose
And
neutrality.
yeah,
Neutrality is probably your
yeah,
best bet with post-divorce because the stuff
yep.
that, I gotta tell you, all the time I hear, "Oh, well, that's why we're divorced." That's like
Mm,
that's the theme, and it's like, "Uh-huh, yeah, but okay, but
right.
yes, you're divorced, so yep, okay, it all tracks, it all adds up, like, we gotta move we gotta move past." I do think things have changed. They're swinging in a more positive direction related to divorce. It's not as
Mhm.
taboo as it used to be. But I think
Yeah.
the big thing worth mentioning is that be very, very careful. Everybody needs to be very, very careful of the conversations around stuff and money. Money is probably the biggest issue with divorce, conflict, and the difficulty in moving forward. I always say, yeah,
Okay.
I think I would feel I think I would feel some type of way if I had to pay my X amount, every so often. That creates a different layer that you maybe subconsciously don't even realize is happening, but it doesn't bode well for neutrality. Let's just put it like that. So, if
Yeah.
there's a way to and quite honestly, I was a divorce coach for a period of time, and every conversation, I would say 9 out of 10 conversations that I would have with couple, the ugly side of divorce stems from money, and it doesn't have to because also the reality is money comes and goes.
Yeah.
Money comes and goes. We don't need to make this decision and the dissolution of our marriage about money. It just, it
Yeah.
all shakes out. It all shakes out in the end. Trust me. It all shakes out. If everybody just gets back to being human and like gets back to work and, there's a lot of moving parts. I know a lot of factors involved, but the minute you let money into it in a way that, you know, creates conflict, that's when it's going to be really difficult to make it a positive experience.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack, and
So
I do feel
much.
like this is a topic that can be spoken about for forever. For those moms who are listening right now, if they're in like the thick of a divorce and they're worried about quote unquote ruining their kids, what advice do you have for them in this moment?
The best advice that I have in this moment and every single moment after this is keep perspective and remember that one thing is always true, and that is that every single thing that you are going through, every single thing that you feel, every single thought that goes in and out your head throughout the day and throughout all of the chaos related to divorce and all the worrying and anxiety that comes with it. Everything is temporary. It's temporary. Think about it next week. Or you gonna truly, if you're feeling anxious and paranoid and stressed out and you're going gray, whatever whatever you're feeling right now, can you picture yourself feeling that next Tuesday? Can you picture yourself
Yeah.
feeling that next week, next month, next year? If you are, then that's a different conversation. That's a clinical conversation that we have to have about making sure that you don't feel that way for an extended period of time. But the reality is that the divorce stuff doesn't matter. Let it go. Let it go. Um, Focus on your kids and understand, respect, and trust the process. It is all temporary. Every single part of it is temporary.
What was that one mindset shift that really changed everything for you as that co-parent that affected like the entire dynamic of divorce and after divorce for you and
I
your
think
family?
I think realizing that their children are not ours to keep. And when you really wrap your head around that concept that yes, we make them, we bring them into this world, but they're not ours to keep. They're not our possession. Our job extends as far as making sure they're alive, well, happy, fed, clothed, and safe. But beyond that, at some point, they're going to have to live their own life. So when you step back and you look at it from, let's say, 30,000 feet, and you look at your children, what kind of shape are they in? And when I did that, when I stepped back and I looked at it through a different lens, through a lens of letting them go, I wanted to make sure that we were making decisions that aligned with their progress getting there. How do we set them up for the most success? And if that meant stepping aside and focusing more on them and letting go of all the crap, that was really the tipping point because I didn't see any other pathway. I didn't see how any of that, the other way of doing things, I didn't see how any of that would positively contribute to their journey before letting them go on their own. And
Right.
I wanted that moment to be a moment where I felt good about letting them go because that's our job, right? To
Yeah.
set them up for success later. And I didn't honestly, when I stepped back and looked at it through that lens, it was a turning point for me where I went, whoa, our decisions now impact all of the rest of it. So
Mm,
it's either
yeah.
us or it's them. Really.
Mhm. So then kind of going off of that, this flows perfectly. That I love when that happens. Um, what do you hope your children learn about love, relationships, and self-worth because of how you decided to handle this chapter?
I hope they know that it's never going to be perfect. I hope they've learned that and they continue to learn that this lifetime is too short to get hung up on the stuff that doesn't serve us. So if they ever have to make a difficult decision that aligns with their individual goals, that they really think about it in terms of regret and make sure that they're comfortable assuming responsibility of what comes next and that they they know that when they stand on their 2 feet and they stand up for what they believe is right for themselves or their families, that they really never stand alone because the decision the decision to do that is a big one. And if they have the confidence and we've instilled the confidence in them to do that, then they're not alone in that process. Other people have gone through it. We've gone through it. I hope that they've learned that, through us as an example. And I hope that they learn that, um, you know, life is all about falling in love and figuring it out. And literally the only point of all of it is just to be happy and that it's a choice that you can choose to be happy. That's what I hope that they've taken from all of this. And that it doesn't have to be what they think it should be or what, Disney taught them it should be.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on and
Thanks for
diving
having me.
more into. Oh my God, of course. I mean, this is such a
I could talk
difficult
about it all
topic.
day.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's so many different topics and ideas and situations, and I mean, yeah, it could be talked about forever. And like you said, there's a lot of progress to happen, but I think that this has like brought light to potentially a lot of situations that people are
I hope so.
experiencing right now. Yeah, especially at a time where you can feel very alone in larger life
Oh, yeah.
changes like this. So, for those listeners out there, I hope that if you are going through something like this, whether it be thinking about divorce, filing for divorce, post divorce, figuring out co parenting dynamics, or just parenting dynamics as we've redefined today, I hope you found a slice of comfort out of this. Tiff, do you have any public social media or ways that listeners could reach out to you if they had further questions?
Honestly, if you do have questions, if anybody has questions or they're looking for clarity or even just, somebody to help them navigate this life shift, I would just email me at tpreston.thomas@gmail.com and I will definitely field that. I will definitely be there um, for that conversation. I'm happy to serve as a resource to anybody. And I also want to be clear that if you are out there getting grief or body shamed for your revenge body, quote unquote, post divorce. I want to
Yeah.
I want to make sure that everybody understands. It sounds so silly, but I want to make sure that everybody understands it's not actually a revenge body that everybody is up in arms about. It's actually just stress. you know, it's
Yeah.
very common to lose weight after divorce. It's very common to not sleep. It's very common to go through physiological changes related to divorce. So everybody needs to relax. It's not a revenge body. Nobody's coming for your husband. That. All of that is, a pseudoscience sort of.
God, we didn't even go through that. We didn't even go through that
I know
conversation.
there's so
We
much
might
good stuff here. Really.
we might need a part two. We might. Again, for those listening, it was tpreston.thomas@gmail.com. And I will also include that in the show notes in case you're very visual like I am. But thank you again, Tiff, so, so,
Thank
so much for coming on. Thank you all for listening. If you had any questions, comments, feel free to either reach out to Tiff, and then you could also comment on this episode. Be sure to like it, share it with another mom who you feel like could benefit. And then don't forget to follow along and subscribe so you can tune in for next Wednesday's episode of the Working Moms Playbook. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode of the Working Moms Playbook. And also, thank you so much for sharing this episode with any and every working mom who might benefit. Also, thank you for subscribing. It means so much to be able to continue to grow this village of working moms in a world where our villages can feel fairly small. Keep an eye out for next week's episode, always debuting on a Wednesday, and I can't wait to see you there.